Hello, bug friends. I was thinking that I always show you bug friends like videos of bugs from these beautiful ecosystems, but you never really get to see the context in which these animals are living. So come take a little stroll with me through El Séptimo Paraíso, the ecolodge that I'm at in the middle of the cloud forest in Ecuador in Mindo. So this all is secondary forest because this lodge used to be farms about 50 years ago. So this has all grown back in 50 years. The owner, she inherited the land. I don't remember if it was from her great-grandfather or from her grandfather, but regardless, she inherited the land. It was farm and she let it all grow back. This gives me a lot of hope for the future, right? Like if we just give the earth a chance to come back, it will hopefully do just that. Now there are some ecosystems, like I know, for example, in the States, the prairies, we have done and forked that ecosystem up significantly, and it will probably never be the same for the next 1,000 or so years. And even the constitution of this forest will probably never be the same of what it was back in the day. But, I mean, this all came back in just 50 years, which is absolutely incredible. And there's still areas in this forest that are primary. I'm just not going to bring you there because it is a 3-hour hike up the side of a mountain, and I am technically working. I am on tour currently. So the reason why you still have primary forest on these mountain and cliff sides is because it was very difficult to get your cow and your horse and your machete up the hill, and it was very difficult to farm and harvest up there. So on the tops of the mountains, we still do have primary forest. Now, Mindo, this whole area is really important because, like for example, this lodge has 400 hectares of conserved space. There's other lodges that have 8 or 10 or 100, etc. hectares, and all together there is this corridor of protected forest that isn't protected by the government, but is instead protected by people who have just bought the land and created this essentially oasis of biodiversity up here and protected it from illegal mining and other and logging and farmland, etc. Now, as we come up here, here is a tree fall, or a tree that has fallen, I should say. And when we see trees that have fallen in the forest, we tend to be like, oh no, the tree fell. But this is actually super important for the ecology of the forest, because when a tree falls, it creates what we call a tree fall gap. You can see the giant hole in vegetation where it has fallen and just like, patted everything down. This is super important because it gives all of these little plants time to sprout up and grow. There'll be little trees. I think there's a bug. Yeah, there's a nice bug over here. Oh no, it just flew. Oh, anyway, it was a nice beetle. Little Christ melody, a little leaf beetle. Anyway, when the tree falls, it creates this gap called the tree fall gap. All these little plants, what will become little trees, will grow up in its space. And then this is how the forest regenerates itself. These tree fall gaps are super important for the ecology of the forest, because if you never had any tree fall gaps, you would never have any new growth and never have any new regeneration. Also, looking here, we have this is a Cecropia leaf. And as you notice, they're kind of weird. They grow like this, facing down. At higher elevations, they are white on this side to reflect the sun, and that's because Cecropia are a secondary forest tree, which means that they're pretty quick growing. They're one of the first that makes it to the canopy, and I will actually show you up here. Dun, 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 dun. Up there is the Cecropia tree. You can see all those star-shaped leaves. Sometimes tourists or clients come and they come with me and say that they look like tree stars from the land before time. At higher elevations like this, the Cecropia trees have lost their association with ants. But on the coast and in the Amazon, for example, the Cecropia trees have an association with fire ants. So if you touch the Cecropia tree, you will get stung by ants, but not up here. This is one of the first trees to make it to the canopy, as you can see, and they live for about 80 years or so. Now also up there, you can see these things called epiphytes, which are all these little plants that are growing on the tree. And if I take you back down here to the tree that has fallen, you'll see that these epiphytes, these bromeliads and orchids and ferns and moss, these were all using the tree to get to that tasty, tasty light up there, because you can see on the forest floor, it's very dark. And when the tree falls, it creates this gap where the light can get through. But other than that, if you are a plant, finding light down here on the forest floor is really hard. So you're gonna grow on another plant and kind of use it as a stepladder. If you look at a textbook definition of an epiphyte, they'll say that it is a commensalist symbiosis, which means that there's two organisms living together, and commensalism means that one organism is benefiting and not to the detriment of the other. Think of barnacles on a whale, right? Barnacles get food and a habitat, and the whale doesn't really notice. However, despite that being the textbook definition, we find that that's not necessarily the case. There are some studies that show that trees that have epiphytes on them don't grow as big, they don't grow as tall, they don't grow as fast, branches break off of them because all of those epiphytes are super heavy. They're big and they're heavy. And especially when they are completely filled up with water. Some of these epiphytes are like, have leaves that are as big as I am. So that's a lot of weight to be putting on the tree. So one, we have some evidence to suggest that epiphytes are, while they're not taking nutrients from the tree, they are hurting the tree in some way. And then the other for piece of evidence to suggest that not all of this is so benign is that there's a tree called the guava, you know, like the guava that you eat, yellow on the outside, pink on the inside. That tree actually sheds its bark, and so all of the epiphytes fall down when the bark is shed. So like, for example, here's an example of an epiphyte. This is the leaf of that epiphyte. So you can see that it's quite large. And you're just hanging on a tree, so that's not great for the tree. Anyway, so the guava trees shed their bark, all of the moss, ferns, little tiny epiphytes fall off before they get too big and damage the tree. We kind of stay out here and say that it is the cleanest tree in the rainforest. This is called the mother-in-law's tongue, which is, I did not make the name. But if you see, the tips of the leaves are red, and that is because that attracts hummingbirds to come in here, and this right there is the flower. Zoom in on it. That right there is the flower, and so these red tipped leaves are telling the hummingbirds where that they can find food and the plant can get pollinated. A little cool bit of ecology. This is also an epiphyte. It is growing off of a branch back there. A lot of times the epiphytes near the trails are just kind of growing closer on the ground, and that's just because there's enough light on the trails because we have artificially carved the space out. Kind of coming back to the conservation effort, because all of this land is now contiguous. Tourism funds a lot of it because, you know, a lot of people out here see just preserved land like this as wasted potential, because you could be farming it, you could be making money off of it. So a lot of ecotourism is what keeps these places and this conservation running, because it's not federally protected. So if you're going ziplining out here, or you're with bird guides, or you're with me on my tours, or you're just visiting one of these eco lodges on your own, like, that is actively contributing to the conservation. Conservation here is a money-making business, and that money goes back to protecting the forest. Because of all these conservation efforts, and people like you watching these videos or coming to visit these beautiful places, we have managed to conserve so much biodiversity and revert the land from farmland back to this. And for example, there are over 500 species of birds that you can find just in the small town of Mindo out here in Ecuador, because of all of those conservation efforts. So it is very exciting. I am coming back to the end of this trail now. And so I just wanted to thank you for considering to exploring some of these places. Even if you can't physically get here on a plane, just even watching these videos really helps. So thank you for helping to protect the earth and for caring about the earth. And I will see you in more virtual bug tours.
Hello people of the internet, John Perry here. In today's video, I just found this pile of crazy stuff that washed up on the beach.
Hello, bug friends. My name is Nancy. I am an entomologist. That's my master's degree, haphazardly taped to my wall back there. And I conduct tours of Ecuador focused on ecology, conservation, and bugs.
If all you eat is leaves, you're probably picky.
I like that there's a stick for reference.